All right. Welcome back to the Copywriters podcast with your host, the world's greatest copywriting coach, David Garfinkel. David, how are you doing today?
Nathan, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. As we're recording, this is the beginning of the new year, and we just released the first in a series of going back and looking at some of the founders of copywriting. And man, I'm super excited for this series that we're releasing, which will have already been released when the listener hears this.
Yeah, that was a good one. It was a wee bit of work, but well worth it.
Nice. So that out of the way, what do we got on the agenda for today's podcast?
You see, in the offices of the most successful direct marketers in the world, when a promo isn't making the money it should, you'll most likely hear people speak these three words: call David Deutsch, because he's the guy who can fix it. And he's our guest today. All told, David's promos have come close to pulling in $1 billion in sales. He's written for Agora and for the company formerly known as Boardroom. It's now called Bottom Line Publications. David works with copy teams in the US and around the world. He's author of $1 Million Marketing Secrets and Think Inside the Box, two books I'm proud to say I have in my most important bookshelf, the one I keep closest to my computer. I'm also proud that David's a friend as well as a colleague. Today, he's going to talk about something you might have never thought had anything to do with copywriting. My goal by the end of today's show is for you to see how it has everything to do with copywriting. That topic is pitchmen, from Billy Mays to Ron Popeil to the carnival barker at the county fair. Pitchmen and pitchwomen hold some secrets that make our copy better, and David knows more about them than you would ever imagine. But I do think you would imagine that I would say this: copy is powerful. You're responsible for how you use what you hear on this podcast, and most of the time, common sense is all you need. But if you make extreme claims, and if you're writing copy for offers in highly regulated industries like health, finance, and business opportunity, you may want to get a legal review after you write and before you start using your copy. My larger clients do this all the time. David, I know you've been dying to get a word in edgewise, so how are you? And welcome.
Thank you, David. I'm doing great. Thanks. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So let's dive right into this. We've got so much to cover. Let's start out with definitions. What are pitchmen?
Well, pitchman is anyone that pitches something in front of an audience. You know, it goes back to, the snake oil salesmen were kind of pitchmen. It goes to, as you say, Billy Mays, people on infomercials, people on Home Shopping Network, people at, I think the best are people at state fairs, where they're, they've got this device they're selling or some kind of food that they're selling, and they're trying to draw a crowd and get them to gather around and get them to reach into their pocket and spend money, which, is exactly what we do, but they're doing it live, one-on-one. So they're just terribly exciting for me to kind of study and see what can be learned from them.
Well, how did you find out about this in the first place?
Well, my friend, our friend, Joe Vitale.
Yeah, you introduced me to him. Thank you again.
Oh, of course. One day he said something about, I've been studying pitchmen and, reading about them and stuff like that, and gave me a couple of books. And one thing I learned from Joe Vitale is when you read a book and there's a bibliography in the back, then you go read those books, and then you go read. So you've got this infinite tree branching out. But so I've read a couple of books about, pitchmen, about, traveling salesmen, people in the wagons that used to go around selling things.
I remember you showed me somebody's doctoral dissertation on pitchmen.
Yeah, I was going to say someone actually wrote a PhD thesis about pitchmen, and that's where I learned a lot about them, because she analyzed it from a very academic point of view. What they do, how did they use this, how do they use, repetition, different techniques in common.
Well, your world is copy and copywriting and marketing. And so what was the thing that made you decide they were worth studying?
Well, I think, I kind of came from Ogilvy, right? So I had a very classic kind of upbringing in advertising. Ogilvy was always very first class business in a first class way. They used to say the copy was very erudite, and it wasn't hypey at all. And I think it kind of interested me that I felt like I need a little bit of that pitchman mentality, a little bit of that you sell or you starve kind of attitude, to getting attention, getting people to really reach into their wallets. So that, that really interested. I'm always interested in things that are far from my own experience and far from my own knowledge.
I've got a few questions for you on that.
Good.
Okay, the word engagement is very big in marketing today, and I think it means something a little different than what pitchmen do. Pitchmen have a very special way of engaging their audience. Could you tell us about a few things that they do? Maybe we could adapt to writing copy?
Sure. I think that's so important, is you've got to get someone's attention, obviously. And I think that for a lot of people, they sort of assume attention. They sort of assume like, oh, I'm writing these words will be read. Pitchmen can't assume that. They've got to jump up and down and get your attention. You're wandering around the state fair, you're flipping the channels, they have got to bring you in. And we as copywriters have got to do that too. We've got to find ways to kind of grab people by grab someone by the collar and pull them in to what we're doing.
Yeah.
And, a couple of ways pitchmen do that. If you want, I can go into that.
Oh yeah, please.
Okay. One is to just, get their attention, right? Step right up. If, do something interesting, make a demonstration, show the thing chopping and dicing, be cooking food, be doing something that draws people in, say something that's curious, that engenders curiosity. In a moment, I'm going to show you, the world's sharpest knife, or, anything that just gets your attention by being unique and different. They're going to tell you what they're going to tell you. In a minute, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you a way where you can magically, your knives will never be dull. Or I'm going to show you a way where you can chop, slice instantly. I'm going to show you something that will relieve your arthritis pain. They're always promising. They're always selling what's coming next. And that's certainly something as copywriters that we can emulate.
I got to tell you, I felt my excitement level rise when, even though you were just giving an example, when you said you're going to show me the world's sharpest knife, I said, I want to see that.
Yeah, really
exciting.
We're always interested, I think, in extremes. The most. Oh, what's the most? What's the Guinness Book of Records kind of? That's why that's so popular. What's the sharpest, the dullest, the biggest, the best?
So can you talk about how pitchmen use words besides the extremes that you're talking about?
Well, I think words are very interesting in terms of pitchmen, because pitchmen seems like they're just making stuff up and talking, right? Mm-hmm. But they are very careful about the words that they choose. Very careful about, because they have found from their experience, they're like constantly testing, right? They say one word, maybe gets a little bit of a reaction, but they say another word and it gets an even bigger reaction. So then they'll start using that word. So over time, over the months, their pitch has been finely honed using exactly the right words. And it's the difference, between, like, if you say, oh, you should come and eat at our, great restaurant. Or if I say to you, you should come and dine at our, great restaurant. Oh, dining conjures up all these different images in your mind, right? Mm-hmm. And copy is nothing but words, right? And if every word is a little bit better, a little bit more sharply defined, like dine, and conjures up images in the listener's mind, then the copy is going to be so much more powerful. And if nothing else, pitchmen are constantly conjuring up images in their mind. One example I love, and it may be from that Pitchman PhD thesis, I'm not sure, but sideshow barkers are always like, oh, step right up. And how do they make it interesting, what you're going to see inside, right? They do that by incredible detail. They don't just say, for instance, oh, you're going to see a guy inside, he puts nails up his nose. but they'll say something like, you know, inside Screwy Louie, the human blockhead, drives 20-pound nails into his head with a hammer. So now you see that picture and you're like, yeah, I got to go inside and see this now.
Your voice has been quite interesting as you're talking about them. One thing also you mentioned before we started the show is pitchmen use their voices almost like a musical instrument.
Pitchmen use their voices to do the things that we're talking about, like the engagement, right? How do you engage someone? How do you get someone's attention? You get someone's attention by your enthusiasm, just like I got your attention because I got excited, right? I'm normally not a very excitable person, but I get excited talking about Screwy Louie, the human blockhead.
Yep.
And that copy of, obviously when you're writing a VSL, you can get the narrator be excited, but even when you're writing copy that's not meant to be read, if you're excited on the inside, your copy will reflect that if you let it. And that's just so important because copy can shout, copy can whisper. You know, when a pitchman starts to whisper, you know, it's like he's telling you, he's got a secret and he's sharing it with you, you know, and you're drawn in by that. And that's how copy has to be. It has to shout, it has to whisper, it has to have that variety that keeps people interested. The other, I think, aspect of voice, which is kind of overlaps with words a little bit, is that idea of all those interesting things pitchmen do, like with rhyme, right? It slices, it dices. That's much more interesting than it cuts stuff up into small pieces and it you know, carves them into very thin slices of stuff, right? It slices, it dices. Ooh, that's exciting. I'm almost a little hypnotized by that, right? It's bigger, it's better, it's a bargain. Ooh, all that alliteration kind of has a hypnotic effect on me. And we can do that in our copy. It's little things like that that make our copy more interesting and keep people engaged in it. Because, you know, you see nowadays, all people want, I mean, not all what they want, but people want what's interesting, right? They're attracted to clickbait. They're attracted to things that are interesting to them. And attention span be damned, when people are interested, they'll watch 24 hours of Game of Thrones in a row.
Right. Well, yeah, what happened to that ADD they were so proudly wearing on their sleeve, huh?
Right.
Okay. So sort of along these lines, you mentioned that pitchmen depend heavily on demonstration. And I remember you used a written demonstration. Essentially, you were creating demonstration with words on a page in a very colorful way with your famous Weiland Sisters promo for Boardroom, formerly known as Boardroom. And there's something about putting shoes in a freezer. Could you talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah. See, it's funny, isn't it, how something like that is memorable. You remember it because it's a startling image. But, you know, a lot of people think, oh, demos. Well, I can't really do a demo. We're not doing video. It's not an infomercial. There's no demo I can do. But, you know, it's not true. You can also do demos with words. And this is the section I think you're referring to. It's part of a program, magalog of household hints, different things that you can do to do things around the house easier, better, faster, cheaper. And this kind of was in the form of a letter from someone to the Weiland Sisters. Writing.
And these women, like, they had OCD about cleaning, but in a joyful way, right? I mean, they were insane about cleaning. It wasn't like an occasional thing. It was like their lives.
Right. They were insane. I would say they were insane about shortcuts when it comes to cleaning. And, you know, like that kind of thing about, you know, if your toilet is clogged, pour in dishwasher liquid and that will, you know, dissolve what's clogging your toilet. Or if you get a stain on your carpet, baking soda will kind of, you know, will get it out of there. And, you know, people love that stuff.
Do you have the passage which includes the shoes that you could read to us?
Yes, I do. I just happen to have it right here. So as I say, this is kind of written as a letter to the Weilands in the promo. Which, if I do say so myself, I thought was a very clever conceit. So it goes, my husband thought I was crazy when this is kind of the headline. My husband thought I was crazy when he found his new shoes in the freezer until he tried them on again. Dear Joan and Lydia, my husband couldn't believe it when he found his new Italian loafers in the freezer, but he had bought them on sale, and they turned out to be way too tight and really hurt his feet. I explained that I was just following your advice. Put a plastic bag in each shoe, push it all the way to the toe, fill it with water, and tie it off. Put each shoe in a plastic bag in the freezer for 24 hours. He just laughed at his shoesicles, but I had the last laugh. It worked just like you said. The ice slowly expanded, gently and evenly stretching each shoe a half to one full shoe size. Hey, got any more good news for shoes? Signed, Gloating in Galveston.
Those women are household geniuses.
Definitely.
Very, very, very cool. So, David, we've all been beaten to death with advice from everyone to tell our own stories. But pitchmen have perfected this, and you've taken a page from their book with your own story, right? Can you tell us about that?
I'd be glad to. You know, if you listen to pitchmen, I think one of the things that draws you into it is their personality, and not only their personality, like how they act, they're funny, they're shouty like Billy May or whatever, but they bring themselves into it, right? They bring their own life story into it. Well, when I was a young lad, you know, I had this same problem, or, you know, like my wife doesn't like it either when this happens. Those little personal touches are, and I think ultimately, as you know, as you teach, stories are what we're ultimately interested in. So the more you tell your story, the more you bring your story into it, the more people are drawn into it. Part of my story has always been how I worked at a big New York ad agency, and kind of got disillusioned with the lack of accountability and the, going after awards, and became a born again direct response follower.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I incorporate story.
Now, there's no truth to the rumor, but I just want to do this on the record, that the lead character, the John Hamm character in Mad Men, was modeled after you, right?
No truth to that whatsoever.
Okay. Finally.
Even though we're both good looking.
Oh, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Finally, closing off all the exits when you're closing the sale. What's the pitchman secret there? How do they do that, and how can we use that?
Yeah, I love that whole idea of closing off the exits, because that's what pitchmen literally try to do, and if they could, they'd probably put a board over the exits or bar the exits or something like that. But instead they do that in other ways. They bar the exit because they make it that you don't love your family unless you buy this, this product that I'm selling that's going to make better, more nutritious food for them. You don't care about your own nutrition and your own health if you don't buy it. And also, if you're thinking of these other ways to do it, then that's not good, because for this reason, those are so bad, right? For this reason, it's not going to work. You can't take a knife and chop it. You need this machine to chop it. So they keep closing off the alternatives, not just the competition, but also doing nothing.
And it sounds like they're closing them off very heavy-handedly with emotional manipulation and blackmail.
Yeah, I would put it a little more nicely than that.
Okay.
But, I think that they're closing off the exits by kind of taking you a little bit into the future in a way, because the truth is, if you don't do this, you're probably going to regret it, right? If you do this, you may well get sick, and not be as nutritious. You know,
You
if you
were
don't,
just being hyperbolic to make a point.
I was just right. I was just being a little bit hyperbolic to make a point, because the thing is, you don't want to sound like a pitchman in a way, right? You don't
Mhm.
want to write like a, sit right up, folks. Yes, it's the greatest. It's the, this, but you want to kind of have the heart of a pitchman, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
that expression, think, act British, think Yiddish, right? You want to have that Yiddish
I'm not sure
cleverness.
everyone will know that, but
Was it?
I'm not sure everyone will understand that. So could you explain it?
Well, I guess, think, when you say act British, it's like, well, have that level of sophistication as you go through life, right? Have that classiness and everything, but also have the cunning and cleverness of Yiddishness. But, you want to have that British veneer. And it's the same thing as a writer. You want to kind of, I don't know what the equivalent would be, like act rich, think pitch, or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to have a veneer of not being a hypey salesperson, but you want to incorporate some of these techniques underneath. You want to have that enthusiasm. You want to have that same, my life depends on, these people reaching into their pockets and giving me money, right? Because the pitchman doesn't eat if people don't reach into their pockets and give them money.
No, I think that's a really good point. You've got to understand that, copy is not a joke. It's a lifeline. It's a way of making a living. And if you're a copywriter, it's not just your living, it's other people's livings.
It's easy to forget when you're sitting in front of a typewriter or whatever we sit in front of, right? That there's a sale thing going involved, that people's livelihoods depend on it, that my livelihood depends on it. I've already gotten my fee, right? But when you're a pitchman, you can't forget. You're looking at those people, right?
Yep.
You're watching them walk away, right? You're watching money leaving the audience. If you're selling on, Home Shopping Network, you're watching the counter of orders, right? As this is happening, you're watching how many people are viewing in real time.
I had a friend who lived in Hollywood Hills, and he knew a bunch of people who worked on Home Shopping Network. They wouldn't do much except get in a plane and go to Minneapolis, and man, they'd come home with their pockets full of money.
Mm-hmm. That closeness to where the rubber hits the road, that experience of sell. That's why the best training for a copywriter really is to go work in a telemarketing center, go sell used cars, go sell something door to door, because you see people's reaction, you see where people get bored. And if you can't do that, I think the best thing is, when you're tasked with writing something about a product, take that product and try to sell it to people. I mean, not literally like, hey, would you buy this? But, hey, I'm working on something kind of interesting. It's this thing that, it slices and it dices and it, chops up things. And what do people say? Do they say, I don't want that crap, So, well, how do you convince them it's not crap? How do you get them interested? What makes their eyes light up? What makes them roll their eyes?
Well, this is very interesting because we're going to be talking about this on our next episode. And I'm framing the episode as, getting stories from people you never thought you'd get stories from. But it's really what you're talking about. It's really about talking to people. Even though you're a writer, you don't get to hide in that little, imaginary bubble between you and your keyboard. Well, you do if you want, but if you want to be really successful, you should probably go talk to people and pay close attention to their reactions.
Yes. Well, that thing about Halbert, right? Halbert was famous for, he wouldn't seem to be working on an ad for like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
All he would be doing is going out and talking to people and hanging out in bars, but he was hanging out in bars and talking to people about the product. He was, he was testing out pitches constantly. And I think people don't do nearly enough of that.
I agree. So, boy, this is great, more than I expected, but I'm very not surprised, just shocked, as they say. But I want to bring up something else. I understand you have something new called Copywriting from A to Z. I want to know, what is it and how much does it cost?
Well, it's a report that I did that I actually give away for free. No strings, no obligation. Yes, folks, step right up. It's absolutely free. And people can get it just by going to my website and signing up for it. And it's, should I give the website?
Yeah, give the website.
Okay. It's davidldeutsch.com. So
Okay.
davidldeutsch.com.
That's great. And we'll put that in the show notes too, so everyone can see it on
Good.
copywriterspodcast.com and YouTube.
I can barely spell Deutsch, so that would be very good. Thank you.
I have one question before we're out of here, Double D.
Yeah.
And that is something that I didn't hear you guys mention throughout this episode, but I think is relevant, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Speaking from the stage and selling from the stage seems to be the next, or one of the next evolutionary steps of the pitchman. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's certainly the modern version in a way. And the closest thing that we may get to experience that is, selling from the stage. And, it's the same thing. It's really the same principles of how do you keep that crowd's attention? How do you start that stampede to the back of the room or get them to fill out those order cards? How do you close off all those exits? I think a lot of these principles apply to that, obviously. And I think for copywriters, I think they should try to get that experience if they can. Just like I think all copywriters should sell something, just to have that experience of watching orders come in and seeing what works and what doesn't, and getting that hands-on kind of feel.
Awesome.
I remember once, long time ago, I worked in the home appliances department of Bloomingdale's. I was selling Cuisinarts,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, okay, I'm going to do this, and I got, I became the highest. I had the highest sales of anyone there, but then I got bored. I said, okay, I've done that. Now what? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think being a copywriter is probably better than being a Cuisinart salesman for the rest of my life. A little more variety.
Interesting. You feel like you learn things from doing that, though, that you now incorporate in copywriting in terms of talking about benefits and not features or whatever the.
I feel like it. I can't remember anything I consciously did, but I was probably doing the same thing that you describe a pitchman does, maybe more deliberately and more consciously. I would try all kinds of stuff, and when something worked, I'd repeat it.
Yeah, the potential for someone walking away from you is so powerful an experience because you learn what keeps them there, right?
Yes.
And it's like instant testing. If I say this, they walk away. If I say this, they don't walk away at that point.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a way, having a sales job is good, but having a job where you're pitching and you get a yes or a no, the sort of one call close kind of thing, whether it's, in the home or in business or in a store or a county fair, sounds like the best kind of experience of all.